The Silent Rose of Rue Montaigne. In the heart of Paris, in the year 1883, the Rue Montaigne was neither noble nor poor. Its stones had seen soldiers, poets, and sinners walk the same path toward oblivion. On that narrow street stood a small bookbinding shop with a cracked window and the faint smell of glue and parchment. Its owner, Etienne Larocque, was a man of quiet dignity, a figure bent by solitude more than by age. Etienne had inherited the shop from his father, who had once bound books for the nobles of Versailles. But times had changed. The noblemen were gone, and now Etienne repaired school books for children whose parents could barely afford bread. He lived behind the shop in a single room with a small iron stove, a wooden table, and a portrait of his late wife, Madeleine. She had died 10 years before, leaving behind silence thick as dust on the shelves. Every morning, Etienne began work before dawn. He stitched torn pages and pressed leather covers until the sun rose over the rooftops. His life was measured by the ticking of the old clock above the door and the rhythm of his needle. He did not speak much. There was no one to speak to. Only when he passed the bakery did he nod at the girl who sold bread, Elise. Elise was 17, with hair the color of chestnuts and eyes that carried both hunger and defiance. She was the daughter of the baker who had died in the Commune uprising. Since then, she worked from dawn to dusk, carrying sacks of flour heavier than her own body. Yet every morning, when Etienne passed, she greeted him with a smile that pierced through the grayness of his existence. One morning, as the city awoke under a pale sky, Etienne found a small flower left at his door, a white rose. Its stem was thin, its petal slightly wilted, but it was pure. He looked around, but no one was there. He took the rose inside and placed it in an ink bottle beside Madeleine's portrait. The next morning, another rose appeared, and then another, every day, without fail. Etienne began to wait for it, though he never admitted it to himself. The roses became part of his ritual. Light the stove, sharpen the knife, pick up the rose. The air in his shop seemed different now, carrying the faint perfume of life returning to the forgotten corners of his soul. But the mystery gnawed at him. Who left the roses? A child playing a game? A neighbor's kindness? Or something divine mocking his loneliness? Days passed, then weeks. One evening, Etienne closed his shop later than usual. The lamplighter had already made his rounds, and Rue Montaigne lay half asleep in golden silence. As he turned the key in the lock, he saw movement near the doorway, a shadow bending quickly, then vanishing around the corner. He followed. Down the street, beneath a broken lamppost, stood Elise, clutching a small basket. Inside it were roses, some fresh, some fading. She froze when she saw him. For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of distant hooves filled the pause between them. "It was you," Etienne said finally. She nodded, lowering her gaze. "You looked so lonely, Monsieur Larocque. You always looked like you were waiting for something that would never come. I thought maybe a rose could make you forget." Etienne's throat tightened. "Forget?" he murmured. "My wife loved roses. She planted them by the window every spring. When she died, they withered one by one. I thought they would never bloom again." Elise's eyes glistened. "Then let them bloom again, even if only in memory." He wanted to scold her, to say she should not waste her time on an old man's sorrow. But her words struck something buried too deep for logic. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as the weary craftsman behind his counter, but as a man who had once loved and lost and yet still lived. From that night, a strange companionship began. Etienne came every evening after work. She swept the shop, helped organize the piles of books, and listened as Etienne told stories of the Revolution, of love letters bound in silk, of his youth spent by the Seine. In return, she spoke of her dreams, to learn to read, to travel beyond Paris, to live a life where she could choose her own fate. He taught her letters by candlelight. Her fingers, rough from kneading dough, trembled as she traced words from Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. When she read the first full sentence aloud, Etienne felt tears rise behind his eyes, tears he thought had long dried with time. The neighborhood began to whisper. They called it le scandale tranquille, the quiet scandal. What business had an old widower with a young girl who should be married, not reading poetry? But neither Elise nor Etienne cared. Between them was no sin, no lust, only a fragile redemption built from words and roses. Winter came harsh and early. Elise fell ill. The cold crept through the walls of the bakery, and she continued to work, coughing behind the counter. Etienne brought her tea, then books, then silence when words no longer helped. One night he found her feverish, her small hands cold. He begged her to rest, but she smiled faintly. "Don't be sad, Monsieur Leroc. If I go, the roses will still bloom. You'll see." She died before spring returned. On the first day of March, Etienne placed a single white rose on her grave, then went back to his shop. That morning, for the first time in 10 years, he opened the shutters wide to the sun. And there, beneath the cracked window, where no flower had grown before, a small rose bush had broken through the stone, one fragile bloom swaying in the wind. He touched the petals. They were white, pure, eternal. He smiled quietly, and for the rest of his days, every book he bound carried a pressed rose petal inside, a secret promise between two souls who had met across the distance of years and sorrow. And when Etienne Leroc died, years later, the townspeople found on his table a single unopened book,